Hello, everyone. We are at the top of the hour, and I'd like to get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is Thomas Meredith. I'm the Marketing Director for RTM Consulting. And on behalf of RTM Consulting, I would like to welcome you to today's webcast, After the Shift, Steps to Successfully Execute on the Journey to an Outcome-Based Services Model. Today's webcast is designed to provide specific actions that services leadership need to take to ensure they can shift from a traditional service supplier to a differentiated and highly competitive supplier delivering improved customer outcomes. But before we begin, I do want to start with a few of our standard housekeeping items. A copy of the deck is available. If you're interested in receiving a copy, just please email your request to info@rtmconsulting.net, info@rtmconsulting.net, and we can send that out to you. We are recording the webcast as well. Once we get it archived and up on the site, you will receive an email with a link to that recording. You will have to enter your email address to access that, but that's it, just your email address, and you'll be able to access the recording of the webcast and view it at your convenience. As always, we are taking questions today. I'll reiterate, we will not stop the webcast for any questions, but throughout the webcast, please enter any questions you have in the panel there, in the window pane of your GoToWebinar panel. I'll be collecting those throughout the webcast, and we'll have a brief Q&A session at the end of the broadcast. And also, for anyone interested, there is one PDU web-based instruction for today's content, and that information to claim that PDU will be available at the end of the webinar when we bring up our Q&A screen. Okay, that covers my brief housekeeping items. I'd like to get started. Presenting today's webinar is RTM Consulting's Managing Partner, Bill Steenberg. Bill heads up our Field and Support Services practice and has extensive executive experience leading complex services operations in multiple global companies supporting enterprise and consumer customers. So we're very excited to have Bill lead today's webcast. Bill, I'll throw it to you.
Well, thank you very much, Thomas, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, to everybody who's joining us today. I am very excited about the opportunity to talk to you about what I think is one of the largest opportunities facing you all in the services industry today. I've been in the services industry for 35 to 40 years, and the transformation in watching companies make this journey to an outcome-based services model is about as big and as exciting as anything I've ever seen. What I'd like to do is to share with you today kind of a template that your service organization can use to make that transition. You know, how to essentially produce the results that you require today to meet your short-term commitments to your current business model, right, because we all have those, as well as fund the investments needed to make this transformation to an outcome-based model. You know, in essence, this is how to both survive and thrive personally and professionally during this time of transformation. Quickly looking down the objectives. Here, I'm having a hard time getting the slides advanced. There we go. For the agenda today, a real brief look at it. We'll cover the objectives of what we're going to try and accomplish today. You're investing valuable time here, and we want to make sure it's worth your while. We'll provide a very brief background on RTM Consulting, just to establish that we have some credibility to lead this discussion today. And then we'll take a deeper dive into what this business model transformation going on is and the steps you need to take to be successful on it. And then we'll finish with a quick summary and tips, things to keep top of mind as you begin your journey to an outcome-based model. And again, as Thomas noted, we'll leave time for some Q&A. So we have 4 easy, simple objectives. You know, how to improve your results you're currently delivering to meet your current year commitments, and provide the investments. Most companies don't have a bag of investment dollars, particularly at this time of the year, that somebody's offering to service organizations to make this transformation successful, so you're going to have to create it yourself. How to migrate to the B4B model, with B4B as an outcome-based model that we're referring to. You know, and then how to develop and gain alignment within your company to do this, and as I said earlier, how to survive and thrive by avoiding some of the common failure modes that you'll see on that. A little bit of background on RTM Consulting. In a nutshell, we're a consulting company with a very targeted niche market. You know, our mission is to help other service companies, service organizations, services like consulting services, professional services, field and support services, as Thomas mentioned, are the practices that I'm heading right now, educational services, no ideas how to help them get better at what they do. We differentiated by some really good thought leadership and innovative frameworks and implementable solutions, but I think as much as differentiated as much by the fact that all these solutions are delivered by very experienced operational service leaders who have actually been in the trenches, been there, done that, been in your shoes. And the net is to get clients, the clients that we work with actually get business results, accelerated business results that are truly sustainable. Kind of gave you a little bit of background information on me, but I joined RTM Consulting a year and a half ago now as a managing partner. Prior to that, I was Senior Vice President of Xerox Services. It was a $5 billion, 25,000 people organization, and it was technical services, professional services, and a outsourced, the managed services part of the business. And part of what we're going to talk about, certainly cost optimization always is front and center, but channel optimization, remote solutions, et cetera, was a really, really big part of our delivery strategy. You can see from the rest of the resume, I'm a career services individual. I was head of CEO of a small software company, $40-50 million software company that did web-based collaborative decision support around the supply chain, service supply chain. And prior to that, I led the customer service support organization at Danka and spent 17 years in various positions with Eastman Kodak Company. Here's a quick look at the clients, just so you know some of the customers we're dealing with. Professional list, but our clients predominantly cover high-tech, growing focus on healthcare and a few of the other verticals, in range from Fortune 500 names with billions of dollars in revenue to both medium and smaller businesses. In fact, we presented at Technology Services World in San Jose last month with one of our clients, NCR, and I always find it interesting that NCR was the company that gave us the original B2B business model over 130 years ago. And they themselves are on their own journey to how to become a B4B company, and a lot of the issues and challenges we're going to talk about, they too are wrestling with themselves, right? So it's probably time to transition to what is this business model thing we're talking about, and it's basically how does a field and support organization replace a traditional service offering, right? One where technical services used to get provided, say, for a fixed price, to new models where the revenues are going to be earned by delivering positive customer outcomes. And in our minds and in the clients we're dealing with, the most challenging problem, and hence the reason for this webinar today, manifests itself in a shorter-term financial one. And that's that as the operating models transition, the service organization finds itself unable to deliver short-term financial commitments, as well as generate these investment dollars needed to go to an operating model transformation. At the same time, customer expectations are increasing. Customer executives outline really aggressive cost objectives, which in my mind and in the mind of a lot of people we work with are sometimes irrational for the service organization in an effort to meet delivery of quarterly commitments they've made to Wall Street. And in essence, you end up with predictable yet unsatisfactory results to all. Here's a slide, I first would have used in the early 1990s, actually, so I kind of smile because it wasn't that far off, but it's a traditional view of a services business model and the orientation on it. On the top, it starts with companies that are product-centric, right? So the products you're offering in services very often are a negative commodity with it. And as you work your way down, say in about the middle of the page, you get companies that are more service-centric, where they actually lead with product. The services are now strategic, and they differentiate and enhance the product sales. They're actually pulling product sales through. And when you get to the bottom, we used to not call it outcome-centric. We call it solution-centric, where the outcome, where what the services offering actually is, and that's a outsourcing business, managed service, could be business process reengineering, on it. And usually as you went from top to bottom, the percent of revenues that come from services would change, right? The bottom would be purely almost 100% services revenues, and the top would be predominantly a product revenue. So that's kind of the orientation we used to have for a long time. And then it's viewed differently, right? The model's changing, and a great book came out last year, and if you haven't got it, I highly recommend you look at it and get a copy. It's B4B. It's how technology and big data are reinventing the customer-supplier relationship. And written by J.B. Wood, who is the CEO of TSIA, Todd Hewlin, who's a managing partner with the Kasman Group, and Thomas Law, who's also an executive with TSIA, as well as a college professor on that. But it talks about this transformation. And the reason this transformation, and it ought to be a mandatory read, becomes so important for you is this industry evolution is an outcome-based focus. It's going to have significant implications to your employees, your customers and clients, your service organization, and ultimately, and that's where we're going to start with, your company and your shareholders. As you can see in this one, it's almost like you flipped the axis from the previous slide, right? You've got the product focus on the far left, level 1 supplier, level 2 the supplier, and then outcome focused on the far right, the level 3 and level 4. And if you look at those arrows, the customer power increases greatly as you go across that. So early in it, when it's just a basic offer, there's more power in the hands of the supplier and less in the customer. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in the next slide. But it's really important to understand that, because once you get to an outcome base, that's where the power really switches. You need to understand that and what it means to your business model, and then also need to understand what it means to the offering that you have to bring to the table. And that bold bar in the middle of this slide is there for a reason. It's really hard to make the jump from a level 2 to a level 3. And most clients that we're working with have some services in level 2, some in level 3, but they're having a problem making the jump for a lot of reasons. And this is the biggest reason. And this is why it's so important for you to understand the business model implications of the actions we're going to talk about. And this is what we call fish squishing, right? You've got a fish there in the middle, and it's created by the movement from level 2 to level 3. So on the left side of this one, you're going to see level 1 and 2 in your revenue and cost, and on the far right is the end state in level 3. And what's happening is here essentially a change from a traditional CapEx model. So a CapEx model where you sell the product up front, you get 70%, 50 to 30% of your revenues are paid up front. The product assets and risk get transferred to your customers' balance sheets or off yours, so you don't have to worry about them. And then you got this nice revenue stream based on annual service charges, right? And that's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it's an OpEx model, an operating expense model. And so you're not getting the equipment sale or the product sale up front. You're doing it in some sort of, software as a service type model. It's 10 to 20% of the revenues are received up front. The assets and the risk remains on the supplier's balance sheet. This is huge. If future revenues become dependent on the outcomes that you deliver, they're paying for business model outcomes, right? So that really depicts the challenge that it causes on your financial plan. Your service revenues are going to dip quickly, and they dip quickly for a couple of reasons. One is the legacy business model is starting to produce less revenue. Right? The traditional model is starting to produce less. And you're trying to stand up the new model, but the new model, you don't get the revenues up front, yet it costs you more. And the area shaded in the middle of fish above is the financial challenge created by reduced or delayed revenues and increased costs that are created in the early phases of this operating model. Now, I can use things from my own experience. At one time we signed a Xerox a $2 billion account. It was a services account, major support for Medicaid processing the payments, but literally invested tons of costs up front. And by the time this 5-year deal was actually going to break into what we call the black, we were a couple of years into this. Okay, so the revenues went down, the costs set up were high. That's a huge impact on your business model. So, you're pursuing a strategy that in the shorter run delivers falling revenues and increasing costs, and that's really not a winning recipe if you're a public company, right? Especially if you're obsessed on delivering short-term financial results in the quarter to meet some shareholder commitment. And given that many of these organizations and companies we're dealing with have their largest revenue streams and cost bases tied up in service organizations, when that revenue starts to dip, the lion's share of the cost pressures put on the existing service leadership to take, whatever actions they'll tell you to deliver these financials. And since most service organizations, they say they're a P&L, but they're operating as a cost center, whatever is simply code for aggressive cost actions. And to be quite honest, some of these aggressive cost actions don't pass what I call a good sense test. And I got to be honest, too, it's not to frighten you off, but if that's not enough to scare you, most people we work with tend to be overly optimistic when you're doing the business model planning around. The transformation time is probably going to take longer than you think to get to an outcome-based model. the legacy or level 2 revenue streams. And a lot of companies we're working with, they start to come down a little bit, and then they go down quicker than forecasted. And the costs to set up the new model are greater than planned. And so the question is, how do you squish this fish in those 3 areas, and how do you put pressure on those vectors? You need to improve your existing cost structure. You got to positively change this revenue trajectory, and you got to shorten the time frame. And you got to do it all at once. And so, to do that, we recommend what we call a simple 4-pronged strategy that can be used to effectively execute and manage the challenges on this transformation to a level 3 company. And what it does is it accelerates the cost savings in the level 2 model and ensures profitable revenue growth in the new model. It's basically a 4-phase approach, and it puts the initial emphasis on the financial side of the equation to ensure that the company and you as service leaders can survive to make this during transition. And the main reason to start here is that revenue and profits, as I said earlier, are in decline for the traditional model, and you need investment dollars to set up the new model. And if you're not doing good portfolio management so that you understand that and can actually see that, you need to step back and do it. So, step 1, optimize the current model. Now, that's what we're going to talk about today for the most part. And it doesn't mean that the other 3, developing this engine of growth to deliver incremental revenue and profits is important. It doesn't mean that going after the customer value prop where you enhance the value by enabling customers to consume full value is important. And this workforce transformation, all is important. Yeah, but delivering the financial goods buys you and your team the internal credibility to complete the journey. Theoretically, this slide always bothers me, and practically for some lucky companies. I'm really a believer that the order should be reversed. That you got to start with a good employee, that drive great customer value, and it drives your revenue growth and a good business model. The reality check is, and if you want me to be intellectually honest with you, most of the people we're dealing with, that's not where they're at right now. The reality is they need to optimize the current business model to produce the funding, and that's why we recommend the best start this way. So now, if you're going to start optimizing the current business model, we again recommend a fairly simplistic view, a couple-step view. The first step would be to get your service delivery channels right? And that, by service delivery channels, I mean what you're going to do on site, what you're going to do on call, and what you're going to do online. We call it shift left. And you got to get that right first. I'm going to explain why. Then we recommend you optimize the costs within a channel, right? And we're going to talk through some of the strategies, but as always, we see a lot of great strategies that are poorly executed and never deliver the results. And I think that's where you got to ensure your company has that effective execution on. So if you look at this shift left strategy, concept's simple. You use remote solutions to appropriately shift your delivery. Start on the right-hand side on this one. That's what we call it shift left. On what you do on site, and move it across to, ultimately to, web self-help, chat, social community, whatever you got there. It lowers your cost and improves, time to problem resolution as you go across that. It's really important to note the cost differences here, and they're huge. I mean, actually, working with one company just recently, they're on site. Every time they send somebody out to work, it's almost $1,600 a call, right? And yet, it's less than $1 if they can get it done on the web. And so it's really important to understand the dynamics on something like that. It's also important that it significantly enhances the accessibility of your customers and allows them to consume the services you're offering in the manner that they most desire, right? It's key that it helps them personalize the engagements you have with them and to proactively meet your customer needs, and essentially enables your services to move from what is a traditional, reactive and general service delivery to something that's very proactive, predictive, and personalized. So, you do have to ultimately, by the way, comprehend what the value prop to your customers place on the various delivery channels. If you push too far to the left and you compromise the value prop, you kind of have negative ramifications on your entire business, right? So part of this process has to be defining an internal and external value prop on it, right? But I contend that if providing competitive differentiation through service is part of your mission at all in your company, then you really need to be effectively utilizing all your delivery channels and be utilizing remote solutions. It's basically just table stakes today on it. Most organizations, we deal with are already involved in some sort of remote solutions, yet very few, if any, if they were intellectually honest themselves, could say they are currently optimizing the channels. And, we highly recommend the use of a strategic framework around this because it's a systemic way. We work with some companies that will tell you we bought a knowledge management solution, we can do remote solutions now. Well, it's a lot more than that, right? You need to fundamentally understand all four of these areas. You have to have a really good strategy and management surrounding channel optimization, the charter, the right talent and leadership, the right business model, the right governance for how you're going to manage it. At the bottom, you got an operations infrastructure. You have to have one to develop and manage and deliver the efficient and effective remote solutions that you need. So there's very processes there. There's both functional processes and methodologies across the bottom and cross-functional ones, because something like remote solutions and channel optimization doesn't work if it's not embedded everywhere. So think of something as simple as a deal review process or a sales management process, and you're not articulating that, and the customer has a different expectation set up on the delivery. You set yourself up for failure. And then you have to have, fourth, critically important, the go-to-market portion of this, right? And this is where the execution takes place. You have to have on-site, on-call, and online delivery with basic table stakes. You need to comprehend the customer needs and requirements, as well as what your optimization strategy is. You got to get marketing and sales team to play an active role in how they're positioned with your customer base, and you need to fulfill it effectively. And we'd also say you need to have a cycle of innovation deployed, and that's a cycle of continuous improvement. We use something built off Jeffrey Moore's work in dealing with Darwin, but I'm not going to go into that here, on how to manage innovation and inertia around remote solutions, and I think that's really important. We need to put a phased gate transformation process around this, but it goes beyond what we want to cover today. And the benefits, certainly, we're going to take you through in a minute. Improve financials, but don't forget the customer experience, whether it's improved response time or fixed rate, or it could be something as complex as opening new business opportunities for your client because you're connected with them in ways to manage a business they've never thought of before. It improves your employee productivity and competitive advantage on the whole one. I love the quote Peter Drucker at the bottom, that innovation is a change to create a new dimension of performance. And, and I think remote solutions is one of the purest forms of systemic innovation that I've ever seen in the service space. But good innovation, right, it isn't good innovation unless it leads to a new dimension of performance. So I like to think of different types of innovation too. Right? Good example would be Apple. It wasn't necessarily a product convention like the iPod that gave them the great growth, but it was, the advent of iTunes that enabled an entirely new offering or solution on how you receive music, how it was bought. It opened an entirely new business model for the industry and set the traditional business model on its heels, right? So, in that, by the way, iTunes, it's very hard as a form of remote solutions for channel optimization. You don't go to the stores and pick up your music anymore, right? You're getting in an online environment. Today, you switch and you got Pandora, right? So, in all reality, your opportunity may not be this dramatic as the Apple one, but it is a step function improvement. And we've got a benefits calculator. You can just go to our website and pick off. There's a mobile application for it. But in this example, you got an organization. It's a real example, by the way. $147 million service delivery company. It takes 50,000 calls a year. The average call is $294. And what this company wanted to do is they wanted to understand what kind of change they could get from shifting some, and they actually didn't even change the total volume. Now, when the reality came through, we were also able to lower total calls. But what you have here is what they wanted to do is to shift 15% of the calls that they took on site, either an on-call or online solution. So you can see in that circle box, the top under on-site, you can see the 85% going to 70%. And then below, you can see they're increasing both their on-call and their online percentages in the various communities. And I think the interesting thing about this is, what do you think looking at something like this? And I think we've got an ability to do a poll on this. But, what is the opportunity? Is it 5%, 10%, 15%, 20% more? Thomas, could you open or launch a poll so that people could vote and we could just see what people think is available with that last thing? In other words, it's a $147 million business. They're just going to move 15% of the calls that they do on site to a different channel. Going to keep the same number of calls. What do you think it ought to do?
Yep.
You get
Results are coming in now, Bill. I'll give everybody just a few more minutes to enter in your choice. And we've got interesting here. Oh, still coming in. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in here and taking part. All right, slowing down now. All right, I'll close this one. I'll display the results for everybody. And yeah, Bill, we had about 40% of those who took the poll said 10% savings.
Okay, what else?
20% said 15% savings. We had 10% who thought it was 5%, and we had 30% who thought it would be greater than 20. So
yeah,
it looks like the majority was around 10%.
Okay, so I think the interesting thing on this, on the next slide, is it's 21%. And this company's $30 million over 3 years out of the business on doing it. And they didn't change the number of calls. And it's a math-based thing that people don't understand. And I would tell you that the numbers aren't as great here because in this case, their engineer on site with parts was only 400. And I gave you an example of somebody when somebody goes on site with 1,600. But this is the primary reason why we say you need to start here. You need to ensure that you get it in the right channel. No sense optimizing an on-site call because we're going to go into how you can optimize our calls, but there's no sense trying to improve an on-site call performance that really should never have been handled on-site to begin with. It should have been handled in the call center or online and web service. And I see a lot of people trying to optimize calls that are in the wrong channel, and that's just a waste of money. The web address on the slide, by the way, will take your rate car benefits calculator. There's a great mobile app, and a lot of our customers have taken this and put a level of sophistication behind it that's amazing on this. Now, there are more savings available, but you got to now attack, if you get in the right channel, the efficiencies are cost per solve per channel, right? So we're going to take a look at 3 ways, a quick flyby of 3 potential areas of opportunity. And, you know, now you've successfully executed the shift to the left, and so let's go in each of the channels. And by the way, some of you can do it simultaneously, and many of you do, so we're not saying you have to go, but beware of trying to bite off more than you can chew, that you can deliver. You know, it's beyond the scope of covering all cost optimizations in our time together today, but we'll tackle 3, labor, parts, and vehicles. And that'll probably resonate well with many of you. In most service organizations, the largest cost is labor, and therefore the need to optimize this cost is usually the greatest. And, you know, I like to simplify complex topics. And so I often recommend breaking them into 3 or 4 areas to address. They're easier to understand. It's easier to share what you're doing and gain alignment with cross-functional partners. And most importantly, it's when it comes to execution, you can end up with a vital few that makes sense. So, you know, the first area you want to look at on the left here is labor rates. You need to ensure that you got competitive wages and benefits. And to me, it's amazing how many legacy, particularly product companies, have allowed basic wages and benefits to become too expensive, and they're just no longer market competitive. And some of them actually end up outsourcing the whole service just because of that. Many of them aren't even doing, you know, salary benchmarking to know where they are versus the market. And, you know, then this challenge gets exacerbated when, you know, they have aging demographics, and it's caused by, you know, a flat to declining labor demand, which is often created, by the way, by improving productivity through effective use of new technologies like remote solutions. And so what ends up happening is they're non-competitive with younger startup firms that don't carry the same level of burden. Okay, so you really got to get that labor right, and you got to understand, you know, when you ought to be using full-time, part-time, or temporary, or when you ought to introduce a flexible labor force. And most companies should have some form of flexible labor force to utilize or cover part of the demand curve, or the supply and demand curve, but it's more complex than we can talk about in the time we have together today. And then I'd say the next thing is to make sure you got the labor you have effectively utilized. And, you know, to me, effective utilization is really simple. It's, you know, during the business hours, you're paying them. How are they doing things that your customers value, and they're, in essence, willing to pay for those things, right? And many factors need to be considered. That demand and supply planning, could be density management. You don't want somebody, if it's a hardware solution, you don't want somebody selling it out somewhere where you don't have somebody and they got to travel 3 hours to get there. So you got to be doing that good cross-functional with sales. You need to understand technical proficiency, your repair procedures, could be the use of key technologies such as knowledge management, et cetera, all the way down to variability management. We were working with a client this morning on the variability management, and it is 6 figures a month they're going to get. Okay, maybe they're $5 million of just managing the variability, but on it. So it's a significant opportunity. And then you got your, the last one would be the labor effectiveness. Your selection, development, retention of your employees, technology and the product serviceability, the quality and availability of parts and supplies, how effectively your company manages end of life. It's huge variability on that. How well you've established customer expectations for your solutions and manage the labor performance. So in the end, labor optimizing it in this, this can play in a call center and it can play in an on-site environment. It comes down to how effectively you manage all three together: the rate, the utilization, and the effectiveness. And we use the transformation process when we're working with somebody for the first time. It's a 5-step labor optimization process. In it, you assess the opportunity up front. You'll architect a strategy, you'll develop a solution, you'll implement them, and then on an ongoing basis, you stay in the control phase where you'll refine and control the solution. So, the first phase does, here's 3 or 4 simple things. You're going to assess your labor rate and utilization and effectiveness. You're going to assess the shift to the left opportunities. You're going to develop a high-level plan, a vision, a strategy, goals, and get this cross-functional alignment. You're going to start looking at what the financial opportunity is and put together something like a benefit value matrix, right? How easy are these changes to make and how much value do you get back from them? And to me, you need to follow a strategy like this because it's amazing the variability on burden hourly rates we're seeing on labor in the industry. We see people trying to compete with other companies, and they have labor rates that are 2 to 3x what the competitors are. And, they end up outsourcing at some point in time, and they just outsource because they either lost control of the rate line, they've lost control of the utilization line, or they've lost control of the effectiveness line. They all end up giving you a rate structure that's not competitive, but to try and go to battle and you're costing 2 or 3x, that's a really, really tough game to win on. Next one, and we'll go through these maybe, not too quick, but just to understand, here's parts, and we'll not spend as much time here. And we look at 3 areas: the parts cost, the number of parts that you actually use, your parts usage, and the logistics and the management process around that, right? So, essentially on the left, in the parts cost, to be effective, parts cost considerations really need to be addressed in the earliest phase of whatever your product or solution commercialization process is. We use, again, a 5-step phase gate commercialization process, that'll transform innovative ideas into successful products, services, and solutions. But this really is a cross-functional process. You have to have active participation from R&D, design, manufacturing, the supply chain, sales, service, admin. And what this process does is reviews the solution in context of their entire business portfolio to ensure that you got these short and long-term financial and customer commitments you can actually deliver. And we strongly encourage during this initial phase, when the solution is proposed, that part strategies, measures, capability assessments, they all become a part of the business case. And there are other areas, when you start looking at parts costs where you can save money, right? You can, how well you negotiate with your vendors on price or terms and conditions, whether you use new parts or reman, whether versus an on-site repair, component repair on-site, the level of sparing you're doing, as well as the strategy. Strategies on something as simple as commonality and simplicity. It amazes me how many companies develop their products in business groups or organizational silos. And fundamentally, they do things differently, right? And they design systems to do the same thing that are done in another business group within the same company, and you end up with, 2 or 3x the parts cost and inventory carrying cost that you have to have, the training, the learning, and everything. When the The Japanese have this down really good, this commonality and simplicity on the parts cost side. Right now, the usage side, again, affected by many things. You know, how well your company builds in reliability and serviceability up front. You know, the overall quality of the part itself. I watch people trade off price of parts all the time, and somebody in the purchasing function shows great savings, cashes out a big bonus internally, and essentially takes the reliability of the component part or the assembly way down, and the cost of the company are greater, but you're rewarding one group to deliver suboptimal results. They're behaving rationally because that's the way you know, the internal measures are set up within the company, but it's really irrationally on delivering the right thing for a client, customer, as well as the shareholder. Just as with labor costs, things like knowledge management and how well you manage the variability play a major role in it. In fact, just implementing an effective process around variability, again, can lead to 5 to 10% improvements we're seeing in a lot of clients. So if you're not managing variability at all the levels, you know, the individual level, the work group level, different processing, you're missing something. You know, and then the last area to assess is the overall logistics and management process surrounding your service parts. And these areas are way too complex to review here, but you really, really need to make sure you're looking at all of these. Your logistics, reverse logistics. We talked about end of life earlier, et cetera. How you do these measure scorecards and reward and recognition becomes huge. You know, I'd like to share one side note on this end. I've been in this, as I told you, 35 to 40 years of services. And I started off in the parts area of a Fortune 500 company, and I'm amazed how many companies lack any type of strong cross-functional alignment in how they manage the parts process. And at one time, you know, parts were all in parts organizations. And over the years, you know, distribution it was back then. You know, distribution became integrated supply chain, and a lot of companies have moved the parts planning, distribution, everything through this integrated supply chain, and they don't have alignment of something as simple as a process and a measure. And this lack of alignment creates these siloed behaviors that I talk about that optimize individual organization results and just sub-optimize terribly, terribly the company's results. And we're working with a couple of clients that it's almost embarrassing, and you've got really smart people working really, really hard in the company on both sides, and they're sub-optimizing results, and you can't let that happen. You gotta elevate it higher up so that somebody above stops managing the ineffectiveness, right? Last cost optimization I'm going to discuss today is around vehicles. As I told you earlier, there's many, many more. But again, the variability on this one, I mean, you know, the last half dozen clients that I've worked with, the average vehicle cost per month of the fleet for similar type service delivery organizations is ranging from $600 a month to $1,300 to $1,400 a month on this. And I see companies that have $5 to $10 million worth of opportunity if they can just optimize the fleet. And again, using the simple view, right? I'm looking at it three ways. In essence, by the way, most total expenses can be broken down today roughly 50-50. That is, you know, 50% of the costs are fixed ones, like for the purchase or lease of the vehicle, and the other 50% are tied to some sort of monthly operating expenses. So therefore, vehicle selection on the left, single greatest driver of all your costs. It is obvious that it's the primary driver in that first 50%, right? The capital expenses on the purchase and lease, but it's also the primary driver in the operating expenses due to its impact on fuel mileage. In fact, today's fuel rates, you know, $3.50, $4, fuel is accounting for 70 to 80% of the total operating expense, which means, therefore, if I take the capital expenses and operating expenses together, it's the primary driver in 80 to 90% of your total expenses. And I'm amazed at how few people come after this strategically. Some clients go for quick wins working with prebates from vendors or something like that, and yet they don't have the strategic questions you need to have answered, like, you know, how's the vehicle going to be utilized? You know, what's your echelon stocking plan? What's your fill rate? What's the impact of fill rates on labor? What is your service coverage model? Is it better to lease or buy? Are you going to require some aftermarket retrofits on the vehicles, and so on and so on? You just have to understand that before you select your vehicle, and it's not just a discussion with Ford or Chrysler that you walk in and somebody convinces you this is a car to buy, because that's what they have. You know, vehicle use then becomes the second one. knowledge management processes to provide significant savings and ongoing things here. Fleet, utilizing fleet tracking technologies today, you got to have. I don't care how you do it, whether it's off of a mobile device or it's something mounted in the car, but they're at a price point today where you can reduce your operating expenses and miles driven significantly. You got to have some sort of ability to do that. By the way, you get a second hit on that one on labor productivity. First trip home and last trip home. It's amazing what happens to that when there's tracking capabilities added. It improves vehicle safety and even needs to improve productivity, right? And then you got to know when it's time to refresh. My philosophy is a third, roughly, and that's it. You may have up to a third of your vehicles, no more, that you're in the purchasing cycle in a given year or 2-year time frame. A third of them are in the middle, and it'd be great to have a third of them fully depreciated, because then you're not paying any expenses there as long as your operating expenses don't go up on that vehicle too much. And today the cars are designed better, so usually they don't. But having fully depreciated vehicles not only gives you a cost point, but gives you a lot of flexibility as you're moving people around as to what you can do with it. So again, looking at it in 3 areas, you could probably say, okay, what's wrong with this guy? He covered 3 top cost areas. He divided it into 3 buckets. What's his problem with 3? So Thomas, maybe we can go to a second polling question, and why do I focus on cost in 3? And by the way, I focused on them in 2, 3s, or 4s. But it could be number 1 is I'm just getting too old. It could be a spiritual thing with the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or it could be the good, the bad, and the ugly with Clint. Could be effective execution. So Thomas, can you open the poll?
Yep, poll's open, and they are voting, and you can. Oh, we have somebody think it might be the Clint effect.
I'm a heavy believer in the Clint effect for a lot of things in life. So.
All right, let me go ahead and close this. We can share it with the folks, and yeah, it was effective execution requires focus, absolutely. And then we had one who thought it might be the Clint effect.
So the reason I say this, it's tongue in cheek, but I did that for a reason on this one. I am absolutely amazed at the number of companies that talk about the need to prioritize what they do. They Pareto things. They talk about the vital few, and then they're working on 342 different things, and focuses all over the map. And to me, effective execution, you really have to have great focus. And if you can't get them down to a way that it's 3 or 4 things in that, that service professional in the field is trying to support product lines that you're thinking of selling, right? They're involved in helping to develop them and everything. Product families that you are selling right now, as well as in some cases, some of you have products that are out there 10, 20 years. And you just can't. There's not enough room between the right and the left ear to get the priorities all in order on them. So I'm a big believer in focus, and that's why I say when you go to something as simple as this transformation journey, articulate it in a way that's simple. And to those of you that are starting with employees at the bottom and go to customer and then go to the financials, I love you. It's the way it ought to be done. The reality check is most of you aren't. So you ought to be starting now at what is your current business model and how do you optimize it in a way. And in that and on the left-hand side, I look at this and in 4 or 5 different fashions. The end we talked about today was the middle on the results. How do you capture the level 2 opportunities to make investments, right? But there's 4 ands, and you have to do all the ands, and it's not just balance of the ands. It's really alignment with everybody else in the company, including your senior leadership, and this is where it falls out. So you've got to have balance and alignment around financial, customer, and employees. And you notice that's results. It intersects the results. You also have to have, as I move around the circle, a balance on short-term and long-term results. So I talked to you about the vehicles. Somebody offering you $1 million prebate, it's going to cost you to make a decision that your cars for the next 6 years are going to cost you more than they should. You need to really weigh that, and is that a good decision? But I've been with companies that'll do that because they need to make that quarter numbers, and that's one way to do it. And we'll figure out a way to run it down later. You got to be able to balance and align people, process, and technologies. I watch so many people introduce technologies and buy technologies for their own company and then never get the results of the technology because they don't have the process right or they haven't integrated it with the culture right, et cetera. And to me, that gets to the far left one, which is you got to be able to do the strategy, the long-term strategy. Okay, we want to go to a level 3, a level 4 business model, but you got to do the tactical stuff, the down and dirty stuff in between to get there. So this and in service and B for B to me is what makes challenging and fun, right? It's very, very complex. People look very often at services as not being complex. I think it's the most complex thing that there is. And in summary, I just give you 4 or 5 tips on it and how you move to this. One would be the ends we just talked about, keeping front and center. And yes, you got to start with the financials and keep the ends front and center. 2, simplify your viewpoint while focusing on the vital few, right? Service is a complex topic, but you got to make it simple for people to understand your listening. Next one, I get some flack and crap for sometimes. I'm a big believer, and I'm not talking about customers, but you got to undercommit and over-deliver on the financial plan for you. Too often, senior leaders read about what's happening with services on this transformation and put a number out there. You just can't make. You got to make sure you can make the numbers and do it, because what ends up happening at the end of the day is somebody new's in there running it, and when you get to here, this undercommit and over-deliver. The next bullet plate, good sense and experience count. Always has, always will. I have a saying, there's no such thing as common sense, just good sense, but it's not common. They're continuing to work in services, and many companies lead me to believe that. Too many of them have got a ton of really smart, hardworking people spending their days laboring in environments that are void of good sense. It's purely silo parochial behaviors that rule the day, and it doesn't deliver you the financial, the customer, the employee thing. And then I'd say that remember execution does require this effective framework and transformation process. I think these are just some common sensible things to take a look at as you're looking to make this journey yourself. On that note, I'll thank you for joining us today. Here is how to claim your PDU. And Thomas, I'm going to turn it back to you. If you've got any questions, I have been looking at all to see the questions coming in. So if you got some questions, maybe you can moderate a session and we can see. Looks like we got 5 to 10 minutes with some thoughts.
Yeah, sure can. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for your input there. A lot of content covered here in the last 45 to 50 minutes. If you are interested in claiming your PDU, there is the information on the screen. And yeah, but we did have a few questions coming in, and so let's take the last few minutes here and go through those. This first one came in during when you had the benefits calculator up there. This one came in from Heidi, and she's asking about the cost per solve numbers of the various delivery channels. Are they accurate? They seem to vary significantly and are much greater than I would have ever expected, she said. So are they accurate?
Yeah, they are accurate. In fact, I'd even go beyond that and say, the benefits calculator, we had one for that company built in, but I'm going to go back a little bit here to the shift to the left slide. We work with several clients that the costs are a lot greater, as I said. So this on-site cost of $1,500 to $2,000. Now, they're long travel time, and it's long on-site time for this thing, and they're putting in a lot of parts. The reality check is, one of the things you find is if you can solve it on the phone or you solve it on the remotely, your parts costs do go down because people aren't pure all the time on the parts they're actually putting in, do they solve them. Some people put in hope to stop future solve, et cetera. And there's a value in that in some cases, but what we're finding is a lot of companies are putting in a lot more because it is this long trip than they need to do. And it's really, by the way, this is not a difficult exercise to do on your own. I'd highly recommend that if you don't fully understand the cost per solve, at least on-site, on-call, and online at the aggregate level, let alone can you tell me what the, the chat, social costs are, et cetera. You need to do that for your company because you're going to be really, really surprised to see what they are. And those are real costs for one company. These are costs we see in the industry for ranges. And if I run into a few more people at the upper end, I'm going to have to expand the range on site because we're running into more and more people in that 12 to 2,000 range of our on-site call.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Bill. This one came in from Mark, our next question here. And he is coming from a customer experience perspective. Our senior leadership is not convinced of the value of remote solutions. How can we help them see the value in a successful remote solution strategy? It's a great question.
Yeah, boy, yeah, it is. It is a common, by the way, in dated viewpoint. particularly in companies that have been around a lot longer, and they've traditionally relied almost exclusively on an on-site delivery channel. It is common. It has dramatically changed in the last 5 to 10 years, and I would tell you also it's viewed much differently by baby boomers than Gen Xers than millennials, et cetera. So there is a different way that these generations actually look at this. And one of the things we really encourage is getting a really good remote solutions couple-day cross-functional workshop done where you're looking at the vision, the direction, the strategy, and what you're doing. But part of that, we work with clients to develop a value prop. And it's interesting to see up front where the value prop starts and where it ends. Now I'm flipping through some papers real quick here to try and find one from one of the most recent ones. Right. So here's one we just came out of. The external value prop. So we do an internal and an external, and the idea is to get everybody aligned. They understand what you're trying to do with this channel optimization or remote solution. So for externally, when they talk to clients, and this is how sales talks to them now, is this client effectively delivers timely, efficient, proactive, and personalized customer engagement the way you want them, online, on call, or on site, to ensure you get the maximum value out of your tax product and solution. So, it's kind of the way you want it to digest it is the external one. Now, internally, because this client, the biggest problem was the COOs of 2 different lines of business didn't believe it. So therefore, it wasn't getting built in up front in it. And so it was, this company develops and implements remote solutions to optimize our delivery channels, resulting in maximum value for our shareholders, they started with, improved total cost of ownership and superior value for our customers, and realization of our employees' full potential. So they start with a little bit different one. And when the COO of the business group said, wow, I can actually make my business results better, and you spoke to something that he was getting beat up with, he kind of drank the Kool-Aid. So I think you've got to get a cross-functional group of people to look at this, challenge each other ideas. And very often as a part of this workshop, by the way, we bring in what other clients are doing in that particular industry vertical. And I think this client was amazed at that industry vertical, what other clients were doing with remote solutions that they weren't doing, and it really opened their eyes.
Yep, agreed. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay, yeah. This question came in, and as you know, Bill, we did provide a lot of content, a lot of information for the folks today. And so she's asking, you're big on pushing the frameworks and the transformation processes. It seems a bit much. She says, why can't we just do it?
Yeah, the Nike approach.
Yeah, just do it.
By the way, that's very common in services people. I do like a very strong bias for action, and there's a lot of situations where if you're in service and you don't have that strong bias for action, you can't produce the experience your customers want, particularly when it's a reactive one and it's heading the other way. So that's great, and I would never want to dissuade somebody from having a strong bias for action. But you need to do something much more to make this work. As we talked earlier, by its very nature, probably one of the most matrix organizations in any company. Now, it may be organizationally and it may just be in work processes or whatever, is services, and you need to recognize that. And so you got to align these, whether it's, we talk about the commercialization process up front. It could be in the strategy or business planning processes. It could be in portfolio management or the sales cycle. It could be a deal review. I see some deal reviews that set the expectations absolutely crazy, and you just can't deliver against them. So you're setting yourself up for failure. And when it's in an outsourcing deal, you're in trouble if you can't do the delivery on it, right? So you got to get this strategy through to execution aligned, and I'm a big believer in there are some frameworks in transformation processes. Now that doesn't mean you can't lean them out and take out non-value-added steps in your company, but probably a simple one, most of the technology solutions that we get called in for and aren't delivering their value, as I said earlier, it's usually a process and not understanding it and how it works in. And so knowledge management fits in there, or a new CRM system, et cetera. So, you really need to have this systemic viewpoint. So I guess I'd switch it and say it's both. There are times that the just do it approach works, and there's times that you really have something very sophisticated like a remote solution strategy that you got to go. Now, Thomas, we only have a couple minutes left, and we've been into lunchtime for a lot of people. How about just one more, and then maybe?
Yeah, let me do just one more. I like this one, so yeah, let's go ahead and put this one in before we sign off. Kind of challenging you a little bit here, Bill. Peter says, it seems like you were talking out of both sides of your mouth. You told us we had to cover the quote-unquote "and" to be successful, and yet spending time on the importance of driving improved customer loyalty or transforming the workforce. Interesting.
Yeah, so this was Peter?
Yeah.
Okay, so I probably sound like Peter's boss, right? And I have to agree with Peter, right, on this one. All I tried to do, so let me try and come back, because I tried to cover it, and I obviously didn't articulate it well. I'm just trying to provide some tough but realistic input on short-term needs as you're doing this transformation. I've seen way too many great service leaders, service organizations, service strategies never deliver on the potential because of misses on the short term on the financial side. They can have great plans in place, and then they get pushed to this way over commit and they under-deliver, and all of a sudden somebody else with less services knowledge is making the decision, and it's usually somebody who has a great sales background, not much in service, and it hurts everybody, particularly the customers and employees, because they never get a chance to execute because they've got to do it. So there's a huge transformation. The employee transformation is huge. You're going to need somebody who does a lot less technical work and somebody who's a lot more consultative, somebody that's a lot more understanding of the customer's business model and how they make money and works on ensuring the solution, the full value of that solution is consumed, right? Closing that consumption gap, identified back in consumption economics or in complexity avalanche, books written in 2008 and 2011 and 2012. So you have to be able to do that. So I guess the answer would be, yeah, I did. I did talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I meant to. I think for short-term survival, you got to deliver the financials. That's the reality today. I don't say it's the best reality. I love the companies that look at it long-term, and there's shining examples out there in the industry, and I wish there were more of them. And I aspire to take every company away that way. By the way, if you just go after the financials and optimizing it, and you don't address the other things, you're going to fail. You're going to fail in a longer time frame. You're going to fail quicker on the financial side. You'll fail in a longer time frame on the other. And by the way, in future webinars, we are going to get into this is what needs to be done on the employee transformation, and this is what needs to be done on the customer. So we're not going to walk away from it. But you're going to cover a vital few. You can only cover so much in a 55-minute time frame.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay, Bill, if you want to go ahead and scroll down into your contact info slide as people sign off, if they need to write down any information, there's Bill's info there right on the screen. We are at the top of the hour, so I do want to stay with our allotted time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for sending in your questions. I think they were excellent. Bill, I want to thank you again for sharing your perspective as well and give us a little bit of your expertise today. And
thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and with that, we will end today's webcast. I hope everybody has a great day, and we will sign off. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.